In this video, we're going to talk about the biggest mistakes I've made in setting up a productivity system, or what I like to call a stewardship system. And we're going to particularly look at the capture part of setting up a system. If you haven't watched my video about setting up a capture system and why I think it's so important, then have a look at the video linked here. But we're going to go into some of the biggest mistakes that I've made when setting up a capture system and the things that I've seen other people do as well. So the first one is having too many apps or too many places to capture. Now, I am easily seduced by a new app. I love technology, I like new solutions, and I love exploring things. But what I've found is that this has caused me sometimes to have so many different apps or so many different tools that I'm using to capture things that it's really hard to keep track of. And that's what I've observed in my own life or seen in other people, is that if you have too many different solutions, too many apps that you're using, it's actually very difficult to make a decision about where to capture things, where to put things, because you have to go through a process of figuring out which one is appropriate for the thing you're capturing. So the solution to this is basically to have less. So think about what you're using each tool for and see if you can combine some of them together so that you actually have a few. So I would say having 2, 3, maybe 4 maximum different apps or different tools that you're using to capture is a really optimal number, and that's what I've found is really useful for me. The second one is trying to sort or categorize the things that you're capturing before you actually capture them. So let's take a task as an example. So you've got this task that you want to capture, you've thought about this thing you need to do. If you then need to think about which list to put it in, so it's maybe a home list or a work list or a chores list or a fun list, that's immediately a barrier that you have to figure out which one to put it in before you actually capture it. And that slows down your capturing. That means that generally, actually, you sometimes don't capture it because it's too complicated to figure out where to put it. So the solution to this is to create some kind of inbox or drop zone inside of the tools that you're using to capture, where you can just put things. You don't have to categorize them, you don't have to sort them, you don't have to figure out what they are, you're just putting them there. And that removes that barrier between you having the thought of what you need to do and actually capturing it. The third thing is not being in the tools or not using the tools that you're capturing often enough. This kind of links to point number 1 in terms of having too many tools. If you have too many tools, it's actually quite hard to be using those on a regular basis. A mistake that I've made is just not being in the tools enough. So if I have a task management app, let's say, that I'm not using it on a daily basis, or if I have a notebook that it's not accessible to me, so therefore I don't use it very often, and therefore it doesn't become part of my life. So not being in there often enough is a big barrier to actually capturing things effectively. So the solution to this is, again, limit the number of tools you're using, so you're not using as much stuff, so then you're in it every time. And also then place those things in accessible locations. So in kind of a notebook situation, I have my notebook in my bag all the time. So it's with me wherever I go, and I have a pen in my bag as well, so I can capture immediately. On my phone, I have my task management app in the dock at the bottom, so it's the first thing that I can click on. And on my computer, I have my note-taking app, Obsidian, open at all times, so I can easily switch into there and use it whenever I need to. The fourth mistake that I've made is trying to capture too much and also trying to capture things too early. So there is an element of wanting to capture things at the source of an idea, let's say. So you have an original idea and you want to capture it straight away so you don't lose it. My mistake that I've found myself make too often is that I then try and analyze it and make sense of it and almost squash it before it's had the chance to actually expand and grow. Another example is task management, where I found that if I get too granular with tasks, if I get into all the subtasks within a task, actually that becomes very unmanageable and difficult to maintain and doesn't give me flexibility. So what I've found, and the solution to this that I've found, is that I'm quite specific about what I capture. I allow things space to grow. So if it's an idea, I won't try and kind of figure it out, categorize it, or figure out where it goes immediately. I'll potentially just leave it for 2, 3, 4 weeks just to see what comes out of it, and then I might revisit it and see what I could do with it at that point, but not to squash things too early. And then with task management, I found that creating overview tasks or prompts for things is much better than getting into trying to itemize everything in life and have a task for every single thing that I do. Some things should just come out of who I am, and you can't systemize that, you can't organize that in that way, and that's okay. And I think having that openness to things being flexible and things being just, adaptable and not under your control all the time is actually very healthy. The fifth mistake that I've made is trying to push the things that I enjoy, the way that I do things, onto other people that are in close proximity to me or that I have a relationship with. People do things in different ways. So the way that I do things is I love systems, which is probably very evident. I like apps, I like using digital tools. I'm less in a notebook, I'm less kind of in analog solutions, I'm more in the digital kind of realm. But other people in close proximity to me don't work in that way. Some people I know work in a very analog way, and the biggest mistake I've made is just thinking that the way that I do things, the way that I systemize things, is going to work for everyone else. But it doesn't, and everyone is different, and that's fine. So the solution to this is not to lord it over people, not to try and kind of tell people this is the only solution, but to look at the principles behind what you're doing and share those with people and say, look, this is my approach to something, rather than saying this is the solution, this is how you should do it. So sharing the value, sharing the principles behind your approach is much better than trying to force your exact system on someone else. The sixth mistake that I've made, or I've seen other people make when setting up a capture system or implementing a productivity system, is not thinking about when they want to capture and where they want to capture and the impact that might have on their ability to capture, so the tools they might need to use. An example of this is if you've always lived on your own, then there's much more flexibility to capture things wherever and however you want to, right? You don't have to worry about someone else, you don't have to think about being quiet maybe at night time, but as soon as you live with someone else, then you have to change your habits and how you capture things because you've got someone else to think about. You might not want to disturb someone at night time. So that's a mistake that I've definitely made, is as life has changed, and life does change over time, I have to adapt my system. So always thinking about where am I wanting to capture, when do I want to capture, and how might that impact the tools that I have available to me. So that's what I would advise as a solution to this for everyone to do, is to think through those things. If you're not sure how to do that, then have a look at my video on how to set up a capture system, because I talk through that and guide you through the process of how to do that. And then the seventh and final mistake that I've made, although I'm sure there's probably more, but I'll stop at 7, is getting obsessed with getting the system right. The system is meant to facilitate you being productive, right? It's meant to facilitate you leading the life you want to live, being able to steward things effectively, building depth, building the ability to see where you've come from, giving you the ability to expand on ideas. That's what it's really about. But I've definitely been guilty of getting obsessed with getting the system right and spending so much time getting the system right that it's not really doing what it's aimed for. It's a tool to be used, not a thing in itself. So the solution really for this is to learn to love the journey, learn to enjoy the process. Don't worry about it not being perfect. Don't worry about it not quite working. There's things that don't work in my system at the moment. There's things that I know I need to adjust or I need to find a different solution for, and that's fine. Enjoy the process of doing it. Enjoy the fact that you're learning as you go and you're discovering new methods and new tools that you can use all the time. So what you're really wanting to find out is why you're doing it, right? It serves a purpose. And if you don't know what the purpose is for setting up the system, then it will become the thing itself, and that's really not going to bring you much life. So actually thinking about why you're doing it, what it's meant to serve, will help you stay focused on that, and the system will support that rather than the system itself becoming the thing that becomes everything to you. If you're interested in this subject and want to know more, then please subscribe. And I will be sharing more videos about how to take a capture system that you've set up and then implement it and do things with it. And if you're still not really sure about how to set up a capture system, then please have a look at this video and you'll find out more there. Thanks for watching.